Okay, everybody, listen up. We have only one rule here. Don't do anything that's detrimental to yourself, because if it's detrimental to you, it'll be detrimental to our program and to Duke University. There's already been a decision made here at Duke that we're going to have a basketball team. So we're going to have the best damn basketball team that we can possibly have. That's why all of you are here today. You have been recruited specifically for this purpose. Each of you is special. I don't want you to ever forget that. And this is an excerpt from the book we're going to talk about today, Leading with Heart, Coach K's Successful Strategies for Basketball, Business, and Life by Mike Krzyzewski and Donald T. Phillips.
Welcome to Performers, the podcast that takes you into the minds of the world's most extraordinary athletes, coaches, and performers. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Greg Young, and of course, you've just heard from Dr. Duncan Simpson. As sports psychology experts, we'll guide you through the pages of their autobiographies, revealing the mindsets, strategies, and habits that propelled the world's best to the pinnacle of their fields. Our goal is to help you learn from history's greatest performers. For each episode, we read and then condense entire autobiographies into concentrated insights, representing over 20 hours of work per episode. You gain not only the collective wisdom of these elite performers, but also access to over 30 years of our professional expertise in sports psychology. So listening to this, you're saving countless hours while accessing the distilled wisdom and proven strategies of the best in their fields. These episodes take a huge amount of time, care, and effort to create. They are a true labour of love. So if you're finding value in what we do, consider supporting the show by clicking the donate link in the show notes. Your support helps us keep delivering the stories and insights that inform you, challenge you, and inspire you. Every contribution makes a real difference, and we genuinely appreciate it.
Greg, before we go much further, I want to acknowledge that we've had a slightly longer gap between the last episode and this one. Of course, life events happen, and hopefully we'll be back on track.
Yeah, but if you have missed us in this time that we've had away, it does mean that you value what we're doing. So Duncan, tell us a little bit about Mike Krzyzewski, or Coach K as he's better known, and a little bit about this book today.
So Coach K was the basketball coach at Duke University from 1980 to 2022. He won 5 NCAA championships. He had 13 Final Four appearances, tied most all-time with John Wooden. He had 1,202 career wins, most wins in men's Division I basketball history at his retirement. He had 15 ACC tournament championships, 13 ACC regular season championships. He was 12-time ACC Coach of the Year. He coached 68 NBA draft picks, including 46 first-rounders. He was also the Team USA head coach. He won 3 Olympic gold medals. He was a 2-time FIBA World Cup gold medalist and compiled, listen to this record, 88-1 as the head coach of the US men's national team.
I mean, who was the one?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look.
But that's quite a record breaker to be to knock it down from 89-0 to 88-1.
Yeah. His military background, he graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. He served as an Army officer and later the head coach of the Army basketball team. In terms of honors and recognition, of course, with this resume, he was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2001. He's been inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He was the Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient in 2022, multiple Coach of the Year awards, and now the court at Duke's Cameron Indoor Arena has been named Coach K Court. So Coach K himself has written 5 books, and this book, Leading with Heart, was published in 2000. It shares many of Coach K's leadership principles from West Point and Duke, blending what I think are really personal stories and coaching strategies. Again, it's not your traditional linear autobiography and jumps around by theme. So today we'll be going more by theme than a linear timeline.
Sounds like a good idea. Why don't we jump right in?
So a little bit about his family and his upbringing. He says, I was raised in a Polish neighborhood in Chicago where there were always flowers outside the homes and people swept the sidewalks and streets themselves. Whatever you had, you took care of it. Usually the kids had more than the parents. There was a total commitment to the development of the children. My brother Bill and I were lucky. Our dad William was an elevator operator in downtown Chicago. Our mum, Emily, was a homemaker and cleaning woman at the Chicago Athletic Club. I saw little of my dad because he worked nearly all the time. We didn't talk much, but my mum was always there for me. My parents had little in material things. I remember my mom had only 2 dresses. They were clean and in great shape, but there were only 2 of them. My parents never had anything, but they had everything. There was a lot of love and pride in our house. My mum and dad never missed a day of work, cleaning floors and operating the elevator. If they were coughing or sniffling in the morning, it was, I gotta go to work. If one of them had a fever, it was, I gotta go to work. They never missed work, never. That's what I learned growing up. Showing up every day, even if you have to sweat it out. I became amazingly dependable, just like my parents. For some reason, hard and work have been associated with another 4-letter word that have negative connotations. But I believe work is good. There is dignity in work, and hard work ethic forges strong leaders. Whenever I go back to Chicago, I think, gee, I'm so lucky. Not because my family was poor or that I had humble beginnings, but because I had it so good, and because of all the values my folks taught me. They were great values, and they proved to be the basis of how I would conduct myself for the rest of my life. So, Greg, we're hearing about Coach K's working class upbringing in Chicago, but one that's really steeped in lessons of hard work, as he says, and good family values.
Certainly sounds like it, Duncan. What stands out here is how deeply Coach K's values were shaped by his environment. His parents just didn't talk about work ethic, they fully embodied it. And that consistency day in, day out becomes a model for how he's going to lead others later on. So, from a mental model standpoint, that kind of upbringing builds an internal compass when you've grown up watching people show up sick and show up tired and show up under pressure without that complaint. That really does set a powerful standard. You start to internalize that reliability is less of an option. It's actually who you are. And that ultimately is the type of leaders that other people want to follow.
And Mike himself did show early signs of leadership, as we'll hear. And he says, I've been forming teams since I was a kid in Chicago. It's what I enjoy most. During the summers, when I was about 8 or 9, all the neighborhood kids would leave our houses in the morning and not return until dark. Maybe we'd go home for lunch and that was it. We had no organized sports in the 1950s. We were the coaches and players. If 8 kids showed up, we played 4-on-4 baseball. If only 2 came, we drew a box on the schoolyard wall and we played fast pitch. Most days we had 8 to 12 kids. I was usually the one who split the teams. I just took the initiative. Instead of standing around, I'd say, okay, we're going to play 5-on-5. Let's go.
Well, there you go. That's the early emergence of a leader. I think what's striking here is that the leadership journey didn't begin with that sort of title or formal role. It just begins with his initiative. From a performance psych lens, this speaks to what we'd call an internal locus of control. So even as a kid, Mike doesn't necessarily wait for someone to tell him what to do. He steps in, he creates structure, and he basically just gets people moving. And that's foundational to leadership, the willingness to take that responsibility in those sort of loose, ambiguous, unstructured environments.
I think it's such a great reminder, Greg. How many great careers have been launched on a patch of concrete or in someone's backyard with a busted up hoop or a deflated football? It reinforces that where you start really has no bearing on where you're going to end up. Those seeds of greatness don't need grand facilities, just a spark, a bit of structure, and someone willing to lead, as he said. The playground can be such a powerful training ground for leadership. And having said that, one place with a storied history of leadership is the United States Military Academy at West Point, where Mike was recruited to play college basketball. And he says, when I was 18 and a senior in high school, Coach Bob Knight, then at West Point, offered to get me an appointment at the United States Military Academy. I knew it was a great honor and was excited about playing for him, but I didn't want to be a soldier. I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I told my parents I was turning it down. They didn't like that. One day, while I was in the living room, they staged a conversation in the kitchen. You go to West Point, they said. I don't want to go. You're going. We've always wanted you to have a formal education. We never had the chance. This is a great opportunity. I don't want to go. We don't have any money. And you can go to West Point? You better go. So I went because of my parents. I believed in them. They never steered me wrong. Even though I wanted to quit many times once I got there, I couldn't let them down. I could have let myself down, but not them. So I stayed. Greg, parents know best.
Yeah. Well, since it was Father's Day yesterday, I will have to say that you're right. Mike didn't just want to go to West Point for himself. He wanted to go because of probably a deeper sense of loyalty and trust in his parents. And that's what we call values-based decision making. You don't always feel motivated, but when your choices are anchored in something that's greater than yourself, whether that's family, whether that's legacy, whether that's purpose to a degree, what that does is it fuels commitment through those really, really tough moments and those really, really tough choices.
Yeah, values-based decision making. I love that. And I also think it is a bit old school, right? It's you're gonna go to West Point whether you like it or not. So a little bit more about West Point, Greg. As he says, West Point was difficult for me, especially the first year. But one of its strengths was that I always knew where people stood. No one lied because of the honor code. A cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. That code shaped our 4 years. I love a culture of honesty. With it, you can cut to the chase. Someone may have an agenda, but at least it's clear. Cutting to the chase matters in war, sports, business. West Point taught me to tell the truth, and I've tried to bring that same culture to every team I've coached. In our business, we need to react fast, so there's no time for anything less than the truth.
That's a strong ethos, and it gets right to the heart of what makes elite teams function under pressure. Honestly, it's not just a moral stance, it can be leveraged as a performance tool as well. When time is short and stakes are high, clarity really helps to cut through everything. So Coach K took that West Point code and embedded that into his team culture. So put it simply, he took great life lessons from one environment and applied it into another one.
You're right, Greg. And Coach K said that West Point wasn't always easy, nor were the years afterwards, actually. He graduated in 1969 and served as a field artillery officer at Fort Carson before being redirected to Korea instead of Vietnam due to troop withdrawal. He outlines in the book how this experience left a lasting impact on him, with some of his classmates unfortunately dying in Vietnam. And what struck him was that there was a lack of clarity in the war objective. And that memory really shaped his leadership philosophy. And he said that he vowed that he would never lead a team without real clarity of purpose. So his first leadership job in coaching, he actually took over the Army team and coached the Army for 5 years before transitioning to Duke in 1980. And that leads us into this section of the book, which is all about Duke. And he really frames the book in three big buckets, and it's preseason, during the season, and postseason. So a little bit about preseason. He says, at Duke, we search for good kids with strong character, not necessarily kids with great talent who can play, but great individuals who are willing to be part of a team and who are coachable. I've worked hard to get to know all of them. And even if I don't yet understand every aspect of their personalities, at least I know the fabric of who they are. I like them as players, and I like them as people. Greg, I think a lot of leaders talk about recruiting people or players on character and not just skill set or ability, but it's really easier to get attracted to talent, even if the character is somewhat questionable. So what are your thoughts here on really, prioritizing character over talent?
Listen, you can't turn a cart horse into a racehorse, so you have to have the minimum ability to match the level needed that you're actually recruiting for. So Duke isn't recruiting Division 3 standard players, but I do understand what you're asking here. So that talent, or a better word for that is skill. You used skill set before, like that's seductive, it's measurable, it's visible, it's often sometimes flashy, tells a little bit of a story. But character, that really is what we'd consider to be sort of long game stuff. It shows up in dark moments when the shots aren't falling, when your team's struggling, when egos are flaring up a little bit. And I think Coach K really understood that. He wasn't just building or putting a team together to win games. He was trying to build that culture that was designed to withstand that pressure, which he knows he's going to face at a place like Duke. And that starts with character. You can teach skills, but integrity, humility, the willingness to serve something bigger than yourself, that's what holds a team together when everything's on the line.
I love that saying, you can't turn a cart horse into a racehorse. And obviously you want both talent and character. They aren't mutually exclusive. And I'd even say they're those one-off talents with questionable character that sometimes you'd still recruit.
Oh yeah, those are definitely around. I mean, the perfect example of that is when we talked about Phil Jackson. I think, well, it was episode 23 because we were talking about Michael Jordan when he recruited Dennis Rodman to the Bulls, and he knew for a fact he's going to have to manage him.
Yeah, that's a great example. Sometimes you're going to take a flyer on a bit of talent, but Duke has been known over the years of really recruiting individuals with high character, and there is a huge emphasis on academics as well, which we'll touch on. So a little bit more about preseason. Coach K really emphasizes the use of team first language from day one. He really emphasizes in the book the use of our instead of my and we instead of I to reinforce that team that it didn't belong to him, but to all of them. At the first meeting, he talks about players receiving calendars and notebooks with key dates, practices, recruiting visits, team events, and games. Academics are also a priority, with staff helping players organize their class schedules and really communicate proactively with professors. And he says, we also want university life to be a total experience for them. That's one reason there's no athletic dorms on campus. They just serve to separate the athlete from the rest of the student body and to rob him of the opportunity to integrate with others. To me, that's one of the most important aspects of a college education. Greg, this is a little unusual. On college campuses, usually athletes are separated from Gen Pop.
Look at you with your prison terms. Gen Pop, like a Shawshank Redemption, NC2A edition. To be fair, college sports is a lot like Shawshank, crawling through yards and yards of shit with a lot less redemption. But yeah, seriously, he's spot on here. I think keeping athletes integrated with the general student body, what that does, I think it sends a powerful message. You're not just here to play basketball, you're here to grow as a whole person. And that promotes humility, balance, and social learning outside of the gym. I think isolation breeds entitlement, but integration in this case, I think, builds maturity, and it's a subtle but very, very intentional leadership move he's got going here. What he's really doing is you're trying to shape identity beyond sport, so it's more than just the athlete.
Yeah, I think the intentionality really stood out for me. And again, it was quite a shock because Duke players really are the big men on campus given their success. So transitioning into rules that he has for the team, he says, at our first meeting, I give the team only one rule to live by. It's pretty general. Not doing anything detrimental to yourself covers a lot. I don't have to tell players all the details. The upperclassmen let the freshmen know what's expected. That fosters additional leadership. Leadership on any team should be plural, not singular. Too many rules get in the way. They box you in, and eventually a rule-happy leader ends up stuck with the decree he created. Grant Hill once remarked that every team he played on at Duke, I coached differently. Actually, I've coached every team differently. Each year brings a new team with different personalities and skills. To get the most out of them, I have to coach them differently. Each team is different because each individual is different. That's the beauty of coaching, and one of the things I love. Almost everything in leadership comes back to relationships. The level of cooperation rises with trust. The only way to lead people is to understand them, and the best way to understand them is to get to know them. Greg, there's a bit in there with the rules, but also how he treats the teams differently. What stood out for you?
I think what really stands out here for me is that somewhat elegance, if that's the right word, of minimalism here. That really one broad rule: don't do anything detrimental to yourself. What that does is it creates clarity without being overbearing, and it helps them to be a little bit self-policing because it invites leadership from within and not necessarily just from the rule book. So I think this approach also taps beautifully at that idea of self-governance. You empower your upperclassmen to guide the freshmen, and I think Coach K fosters accountability and trust in this process. Those relationships really do become the glue that hold the culture together. And that bit about adapting to each team, that's another mental performance gem, to be perfectly honest. It speaks to contextual leadership, leading people, not programs. As we know, particularly in college sports, every year is essentially a fresh ecosystem with new people in and new people out, and a cookie cutter approach doesn't cut it, no pun intended. Performance is less about being formulaic and more about reading people, figuring out what they need, adjusting your style, and building trust directly with each squad. That's relational agility. That's where sustainability excellence starts.
Well, I haven't heard that term before. Relational agility. Love the idea of being light on your toes to navigate relationships well. And in this next section, he talks about what he calls finding the heart of the team. And I'd love your reflection on this concept. And he says, heart is not easily defined, nor is it obvious to everyone. Just as there are different elements of heart, there are different levels people possess. People have to be given the freedom to show it. I think it's a leader's responsibility to provide that freedom. It can be done through relationships and family. If a team is a real family, its members want to show you their hearts. Leaders have to search for a heart on a team, because a person who has it can bring out the best in everyone else. If you're fortunate to have one or more members with high levels of heart, it lifts everyone's performance, including the leader. The person with heart inspires the entire team. He's the one who makes the formula work, the element that sets off the explosive reaction. Every preseason I ask, where will the heart be?
Duncan, this passage, it's really rich. I love that. Where will the heart be? That's a phenomenal question for any coach or any leader to ask at the start of a season or at the start of any project. From a mental performance lens, Coach K is talking about emotional leadership here. Not necessarily the loudest, but the most anchored. The one who holds the line in the storm. A heart isn't just about statistics. It's about someone whose courage and conviction elevates everyone else around them. And it isn't always valued in teams and organizations, to be honest. And I think that's often to those organizations and those teams' detriment. I really do like the fact that he ties it to family. I do have a problem with the term, and it gets a little bit overused for me, the idea of family. But in high trust teams, vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's actually, as he mentions, the glue that holds everything together. And when that one player shows up with a real unshakable belief or a quiet resolve, that's when a team stops being a group of individuals and becomes something far more powerful in the collective. Coach K is searching, it's for more than just talent. He's searching for a spark, for catalytic energy. And the heart is often that spark that turns that potential into performance.
So do you think this concept of finding heart, do you think it transfers outside of sport, maybe to a business setting?
Without a shadow of a doubt. In fact, it might actually be more essential in business where you've got really clearly defined roles and hierarchies, and those can actually sort of obscure emotional dynamics within those groups. So in high performing organizations, the heart might be a team member who is always first to support a colleague, or the one who sort of quietly keeps everything ticking over in the group center during a project, or maybe when things are getting a little bit fractured or there's a crisis. So their presence isn't always just on a spreadsheet or on a project, but their impact is felt everywhere. And just like in sport, in business, the heart of the team brings cohesion and raises the standard of everyone around them and reminds everyone why this work actually matters. And when leaders recognize and empower that, well, to be perfectly honest, I think that's where the real magic in these groups and teams happens.
I didn't know where you're actually going to go with that answer in terms of heart in a business setting, but I think you've presented a really solid argument. I think sometimes in business, it can feel very cold and impersonal, but finding and empowering that heart might actually be a really useful tactic.
I certainly don't think it would hurt.
Yeah. So lots to ponder on. So transitioning from heart to discipline, and he says, some people feel that discipline is a dirty word, but it shouldn't be. It simply means doing what you're supposed to do in the best way at the right time. That's not such a bad thing. We're here to get an education and play basketball. Am I tough on the team? Absolutely. If they don't show respect to the program, the university, or each other, I'm all over them. I don't want fear to be my primary motivator, but they need to know if they're screwing up, the hammer is coming down. I won't accept mediocrity at practice. I won't coach them if they're not going to give their best. Every year, we create a brand new culture for Duke basketball. New people in, blending with those who have been here 1, 2, or 3 years. The older kids mentor the freshmen. Roles often change as we reevaluate the program. We're a group living together for a short time in our own culture. How we grow that culture, how we communicate, how we care, means everything.
Yeah, Duncan, this is such a strong pivot from heart to habits, because love without those standards, that's just pure chaos. The Coach K's version of discipline, again, and he says this, it's not about control, it's more about care. It's about setting a high bar because he respects his players enough to hold them to that standard. And that's real leadership. And I love the fact that he resets this culture every single year. That's a crucial performance insight. Culture is not a one-off thing. It's a living, breathing system that has to evolve with the people inside it. So if you're not intentional, what you do is you risk inheriting last year's attitude by default.
Such a great line. Discipline isn't about control, it's about care. So, as we said at the beginning, we'll be bouncing around a bit, and here is some of his thoughts on defining success. So, we really talked about heart, we talked about discipline, and then now how he thinks about and defines success. And this is still in the preseason stage. And he says, when most people think of success, they think of a season ahead and set a final destination goal. In my line of work, many coaches choose winning the national championship, but that's a shallow view. Only one team can win it all. If everyone chose that definition, nearly everybody would have an unsuccessful year. Many people set that goal because fans and the media say it's the only way to be successful. But if you're always chasing success defined by others, you'll always be frustrated. There will never be enough championships or wins, and when you finally get them, they'll only be numbers. Someone may say you are great, but you'll know it's an empty success. The only way around it is to define your own success. My passion is to coach and to do things to the best of my ability. I want my team to get better every day. If we do that, the rest will take care of itself. I also want to have a quiet goal to be consistently excellent. Every time we step on call, I want it to be a masterpiece. I love that.
Yeah, this is Coach K flipping the scoreboard here, Duncan. What he's really doing, I think, he's sort of decoupling or separating achievement from fulfillment. And that's a powerful reframe, because if your only definition of success is a trophy, then 99% of your seasons, by that definition, will be a failure. And from a performance psych angle, that's just unsustainable. There's no two ways about it. So the pursuit of external validation, I think it can drive you, sure, but rarely does it actually fulfill you. What he's anchoring to is intrinsic excellence, a daily standard. I love that phrase that he says, a masterpiece mentality. It's not win the title, it's more win the day. And that's how you build sustainability in these elite performance environments.
Yeah, it really is that kind of cliche that we've identified so many times. It's really the focus on the process over the outcome. And that mindset of daily excellence requires structure. And one of the key mentors who shaped that process-driven approach, Bob Knight. I'm sure Bob's got a book, and we'll have to do it at some stage. So
How to Throw Chairs by Bobby Knight.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. So he says, Bob Knight had a big influence on me. He's brilliant and taught me many basketball strategies I use today. He told me there were no magic ones. You succeed by working hard as a group. I also learned a lot about organization and preparation from him. I look at the entire year. It must be planned and responded to. I break the year into segments and plan our game schedule accordingly. The season is long, so we need a series of objectives to strive for. It can be a series of games or anything that makes sense. I call it an energy cycle. Planned, short bursts of energy that keep the team motivated over time. Greg, I don't know that this is rocket science in terms of breaking up a season. It really does speak to just long-term intentional planning.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. It is yet surprisingly simple, but actually quite rare, I've found in my experience. Intentional planning over the long haul, it really is sort of periodization, which can be done in a number of different ways. But what Coach K and Bobby Knight model here is sort of a marriage of that vision and that process. It's not enough to know where you want to go, just having the vision. The journey needs to have structure, and that's what the process is. So breaking a season into those short, purposeful cycles, what he calls as energy cycles, that does three key things here. One, it prevents burnout by alternating intensity and recovery, right? Doesn't matter how hard you work if you're not equally recovering. Number two, it sustains motivation with those smaller, meaningful milestones rather than this just one distant trophy all the way down the far end of the calendar there. And I think three, it cultivates adaptability. So when unexpected or indeed expected stress hits, the team really is primed to pivot in those moments. So from a mental game perspective, those micro goals, they build confidence, they build focus, and hopefully they build some momentum. And when teams see progress regularly, that really does fuel that belief and that confidence as they continue on their journey.
So let's jump into the season itself. And he says, there are 5 fundamental qualities that make every team great: communication, trust, collective responsibility, caring, and pride. I like to think of each of those as a separate finger and a fist. Any one individually is important, but all of them together are unbeatable. You develop a team to achieve what one person cannot accomplish alone. I frequently tell the players, all of us alone are weaker by far than if all of us are together. It's the easiest thing in the world to understand, but the hardest thing to achieve. So the team has to learn how to think as one.
Duncan, I really like this metaphor of the fist. It's simple, it's powerful, and all about functional unity. It actually reminds me of some of the other great coaches that we've covered. So Pat Summitt, Bill Walsh, Sir Alex Ferguson, Phil Jackson, Tony Dungy. I'm sure we're missing some out there.
I think you got most of them.
I got most of them. Each had their own distinct philosophy, but what stands out is how clearly and authentically they could actually communicate that philosophy. I can't recall every detail of every philosophy, and honestly, those subtle differences don't necessarily matter as much. But what does matter is that they all had a clear, cohesive message that they could rally their teams collectively around. Clarity breeds trust, and trust fuels performance.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think the content matters, but the most important thing is to actually have a coaching philosophy, as we've talked about, several times. As such, let's dive into each one of these separately, and maybe we'll combine a few for the sake of time. So I'm going to combine communication and trust, and then I'll have you reflect. And he says, in terms of communication, people learn how to think by communicating. In our program, we not only employ an offensive system and a defensive system, we employ a communication system. Leaders have to remind people to talk to one another. We have to teach people to talk. At Duke, we teach players to talk through repetition, just like other physical drills. In an individual drill, we may set up an imaginary situation where the player talks to a teammate as he practices defensive footwork. You're okay. I got you here. Watch screen. Stay out. I'm inside now. We practice these drills over and over so players get into the familiar role of talking. I also want our players to talk in the huddle. They might notice something I cannot see from the sidelines. Coaches have different views than the players. And in terms of trust, he says, in leadership, there are no more important words than trust. Trust must be developed among every member of the team if success is going to be achieved. That's why I make certain our players know I'm going to be straight with them. Fellas, I am the truth. I say to every team, I can tell and I will tell you where you stand and how you're doing. I will tell you what you're doing right and when you're screwing up. Every member of the team knows not only will I tell them the truth, but I will do so as soon as possible. So, Greg, trust and communication. Not sure anyone is arguing about the merits of those two in a leader.
Yeah, no argument from me. Those are just pure fundamentals. Probably even you'd consider them table stakes if you really want high performance. But what I love about Coach K is that he doesn't just value communication, he actually trains it. So it's not just enough to talk about it, it's about implementing something to improve it. And that for me is absolutely key. Most teams treat communication like a soft skill. He treats it as part of his systems. You know, he talks about defense, offense, communication. So just like shooting or defense, talking is drilled until it becomes second nature, until it becomes a habit. And that is a really elite way to do it. And trust that I am the truth line. I mean, that's leadership in its purest form. You know, from a relationship and performance angle, trust really does accelerate everything. Feedback, learning, team cohesion. Without it, teams get sort of cautious and they get a bit political and they may get a bit fractured if they don't have that. When they do have it, they get bold, they get strong, they get resilient, and they get safe. And when people feel safe, they tend to take a few more risks, and that's where breakthroughs can really happen.
I'm glad you pointed out the intentional training of communication. I actually don't think it's something that we've heard before on this podcast, and I love it. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but how many coaches actually do it? So jumping ahead into next to collective responsibility and care, and he says, people are going to step in mud puddles. They're going to make mistakes. If you're going to have a great team, there should be no excuses and no finger pointing. When you point blame at someone else, one finger sticks out and you no longer have a fist. That one finger can easily be broken off. Care. He says, my wife Mickey reminds me to have a different player over to the house each week for a session of individual instruction or just a conversation. No matter how busy I am, I need to make time for that kind of personal attention. It reinforces that we're part of a family. Nothing demonstrates that you care more about people than spending personal time with them. The more it's a one-on-one encounter, the better. Caring is not singular in description. It's, I care about you as a person. And also, I care about the job I'm doing on the basketball court. It's caring about the individual, the team's performance, about excellence, and about winning.
Duncan, collective responsibility is a cultural cornerstone. That one finger breaks the fist line, that's gold. I absolutely love that because blaming doesn't just fracture accountability, it actually fractures belonging, particularly in group environments. And when a team splinters under pressure, performance follows. From a mental lens, shared ownership builds psychological safety. It says, we're in this together. If one of us fails, we lift, not point. And care, man, that might be the most underrated leadership variable. It's not performative care, it's personal care. Bringing a player to the house for a chat, for extra reps, just sharing your time with that person. That's not about minutes or stats. It's just about mattering to that person. When a player feels seen, they are going to show up bigger for you. They're more coachable, they're more courageous because effort follows emotion. And it's so simple, but it's so often overlooked.
Yeah, great stuff there, mate. Not about minutes, about mattering. Love that. So lastly, pride. And he says, my mum always gave her best in everything she did, even making chocolate chip cookies. When we were poorer, she put 3 chips in every cookie. Later, there were 4. But if a cookie only had 2 chips in it, it wasn't her cookie. Whatever she put her signature on, it was done right. From that, I've taken the principle. Everything we do has our own personal signature on it. So we want to do it as well as we possibly can.
Speaking of poor, if you're enjoying what we're doing, please consider donating to support the show. Click the link in the show notes below. I currently only have one chocolate chip per cookie, and I'd love to get it up to 3. I'd love to get to the dizzying heights. I aspire to 3 chocolate chips.
Yeah, I would also like 3 chocolate chips. I'm down at 2. I'm at 2 at the moment.
Stop showing off. Those two are really good close to the 5, Duncan, and I love that it loops back to his roots, to that Chicago kitchen where those values are baked in. Literally pride in Coach K's sense. It's not ego, it's ownership, and it's about attaching your name to your effort. That idea of signing things off, your personal signature. He says that's everything, because when people feel that what they do reflects who they are, that's when standards rise. Attention to detail goes up, accountability becomes intrinsic, and it's just a better place to be when everyone sort of signs off on their work.
I like that personal signature line too. Great catch. So let's now dive into some of his practices. And he says, during our practice sessions, I strive to prepare the team to act well during a real game. I train them to be effective. The overriding concept I use is, you hear, you forget. You see, you remember. You do, you understand. So we perform all kinds of game-like drills over and over. This repetition refines physical habits and ensures the team will perform well in real situations, because they'll not only hear and see, they'll execute. Whenever I practice with the team, I go in fully prepared. I put together a 1-page handwritten lesson. I decide what points to emphasize and pick different places to talk. Locker room, mid-court, bench, under the basket, to keep the players attuned and aware. We use make-believe scores and practice end of half, end of game, foul situations, and timeouts. We'll even practice a timeout during a break while we're drinking water. We'll set up a situation or make a point, then they're right back on call. We'll practice shooting free throws while we're out of breath, just like in a game. I never use a whistle. I want players to react to my voice, just like in a real game. Greg, as you'd expect, he's intentional, he's detail-orientated, and he's clearly connecting practice to competition, which is what I love the most.
I do like that too, Duncan. And this is where we see the craftsmanship of coaching, often referred to as the art of coaching. What stands out is how deliberate everything is. It's not just about running drills. It's more about scripting scenarios which embed decisions. You have mental reps that he's conditioning alongside physical ones. And that phrase, you do, you understand, that's gold. Understanding isn't just intellectual certainty, not for athletes. It's physical, it's felt through action. And I love that he changes the environment, talks from different spots. That's a little bit of novelty. That's how you sustain engagement from a mental performance lens. What he's doing is contextual variability. So he's creating pressure, he's simulating stress, he's building adaptability. It's not just reps, it's more realism. And that's where you shrink the gap between training and performance. That's how game day becomes just another Tuesday.
Yeah, I think far too often we've both seen practice sessions across many different sports that look nothing like competition, and you wonder, what are they actually practicing for?
For sure. The closer that we can close that gap between practice and competition, the more transferable those learning things become. And I think it's as simple as that.
So switching gears here, Greg, Coach K tells us about the importance of video and gives us a great example. And he says, I want all the players on our team to see themselves through my eyes. They need to know how they really are, not just how they think they are. If they can step outside themselves and watch their performances as I see them, then they may internalize both their shortcomings and their strengths. That's why video is very important in my business. Near the end of one season, Christian Laettner had a particularly awful performance in a game against North Carolina. So I had a 3-minute tape made that highlighted only him. Then I called everyone into our locker room, closed the door, and ran the tape. After it was over, I looked at my star player dead in the eye. Your look, the yelling, your whole performance was unacceptable. You were bad, Christian. And that bothers me because you're not bad. You're one hell of a basketball player. But if you do that again, you're not going to play. And if you don't believe me, test me. I will not allow us to beat ourselves. Then, in front of all his teammates, Christian looked me in the eye and said, Coach, it will never happen again. And it didn't. We went on in the postseason to win the NCAA tournament, and Leitner was named College Basketball Player of the Year. Years after leaving Duke and going on to a successful career in the NBA, Christian Leitner told a reporter, "We won championships at Duke because of what happened behind closed doors."
Duncan, this is such a good example of performance feedback done right. Now, it's also important to point out that this feedback is built on the back of a really strong relationship with that player, so it can be a little bit cautionary here. What stands out is the duality. So Coach K, he holds Christian Leitner fully accountable and also fully affirms his potential. He's not just critiquing the behavior. What he does is he's very, very conscientious about separating that from the identity. You were bad becomes a statement about the choice, not about the person. So great feedback builds awareness without breaking the confidence of the athlete. And by doing it in front of the team, bit risky, but he's got that relationship. What he does is Coach K reinforces both individual accountability and the collective standards. So yes, it's about him, but it's also about us. And that moment behind closed doors, that's where trust, that's where clarity, and that's where commitment, they all kind of converge together. That's culture at work.
Greg, that's such an important fact to point out, that he had a great relationship with Christian and he knew he could handle it, hence why he went at him that way. And another one of Coach K's coaching techniques is based on unpredictability. And he says, leaders should be reliable without being predictable. They should be consistent without being anticipated. Instead of providing a spawning ground for creativity, a leader may be so structured, so ruled, so totally predictable that he completely erases any enjoyment on the part of the team. I recall one year, for instance, when our guys had been playing very poorly and expected a good chewing out from me. But when they showed up for practice, they found a volleyball net set up on the court, and that's all we did during practice, play volleyball. I felt the players had forgotten what it was like to have fun playing ball. In any classroom, if the students can predict what the teacher is going to do all the time, they start memorizing and stop thinking. Too many rules and too much predictability absolutely kill creativity. Greg, we also saw very similar techniques from Phil Jackson back in episode 23, who always wanted to keep his players on their toes and mix things up and did some wild things.
Yeah, he did. Really, what's at the heart of this Coach K's insight is the leaders should be reliable without being predictable. I think that's a masterclass in leadership psychology. So some people will criticize this choice to play volleyball after a poor performance, but it's not just quirky, it's actually got a purpose behind it. He knows that the team's going to expect punishment, so he give them play instead. And what he's done here is he's broke the tension, he's tried to reignite or respark that joy, and it's just trying to reset things, particularly with a mindset. Phil Jackson did the same, as you mentioned. Incense, books, rituals, all of that sort of almost spiritual stuff that he brought to the kind of the zen of his basketball coaching. Those all just sort of disrupted predictability and sparked engagement. And as coaches, this is key. Too much structure can dull awareness. Predictability can quite easily kill creativity. The best leaders know where to provide consistency and when to break the rhythm of monotony to reawaken their teams.
Yeah, Greg, I really like that line. Leaders should be reliable without being predictable. We can do similar things in a business environment, if I'm honest. So let's turn our attention to in-game adjustments. And he says, basketball is organized chaos. You can be on offense, then defense, then back on offense, then defense again, all within a 10-second span. Adjustments are not unusual, they are usual. So a leader's ability to think on his feet, to react accordingly, to do things without instruction, to react to voices on the court, and to think outside of himself is of paramount importance. That's one reason I focus and rest before every game. If I have a clearer head, I'm more apt to make better decisions while on the run. I'll be better able to adjust. Every minute of the game, every moment that leads up to the game, I'm trying to think and plan and prepare myself and our players for anything that might happen. And that means putting some of my own emotions aside if they won't help us reach our own goals.
That's spot on, Duncan. And that quote hits a core truth. The best leaders aren't just planners, they're adjusters. Duncan, I like the quote from John Maxwell. He says, "The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails."
Ooh, I like that one.
It's not bad, is it? Coach K describes basketball as organized chaos, which is the perfect analogy for high pressure environments in sports and often in business as well. So plans matter, but the ability to adapt mid-flow is what separates good from great. So notice his focus on clarity here. He says, if I have a clearer head, I'm more apt to making better decisions while on the run. So that's high performance self-regulation in action there. So leaders who can detach from ego and emotion in real time, they're going to be far more equipped to pivot intelligently under pressure. And in business, just like in basketball, momentum swings fast. Projects can stall, priorities can shift, teammates can struggle. But what matters is whether you've built the mental agility to adjust, not just to react, but to be able to recalibrate when it matters.
I love all of that. And I think it all comes back to one of our favorite maxims: great performers are great problem solvers. Love all of it. And we're going to shift now into our postseason area. And he says, as the leader of our team, I'm now looking very carefully at the demeanor of our team. Are we healthy? Are we injured? Are we excited? Are we down? Are we energized? Are we tired? Some leaders stay up in the ivory tower and dictate what the team needs to do next without knowing specifically how the team is feeling or what they want. Well, I not only like to be around our team as much as possible so I can observe them, I also like to pull one of the captains aside and ask his opinion. So, after conferring with our assistant coaches, we may decide to give the players a day off. Or we might bring them in, show them 5 minutes of tape, have some pizza and ice cream, and then tell them, get out of here and have some fun. The general idea during this renewal phase is to determine what the team needs right now and then provide it to them. Greg, this is just great team awareness and knowing what they need.
It really is, mate. This is leadership by feel, not by formula. So Coach K's approach here, it's great. It's absolute situational leadership. Not being locked into a schedule, he's locked into his team state right now. The physical, the emotional, the psychological. Really all he's doing is he's asking what do they need right now, not what's on the plan, what are we doing right now? And to be honest, I love how low tech it is. 5 minutes of tape, pizza, ice cream, fun. That's high performance built on human understanding, not simply just data. And we said it a few episodes ago, performance doesn't live on a spreadsheet or on a PowerPoint. It's also such an important and powerful reminder that recovery isn't just about rest and getting off your feet. It's about reconnection. It's about recharging the spirit. And that's how you keep teams sharp when it does matter the most.
I think pizza and ice cream would probably go down pretty well with college students. And as such, being aware of what your team needs, he shares a great example of purposeful body language. And he says, a leader has to show the face his team needs to see. Before he speaks, they see his face, his eyes, even his walk. A good leader presents an image that gives confidence to his team. I encourage players to walk right, stand right, look good. If you want to be a really good player, I tell them, you have to walk like a really good player. I learned this at West Point, where each cadet majors in leadership. Show your team you're worthy to lead them. Stand tall, stay stoic, or smile as needed. Keep your face and uniform clean. Don't show mud on your shoes. Portray an image that gives your team whatever they need. A smile, a frown, emotion, anger, a joke. A leader has to conquer emotions like fear. You don't always beat fear with a hug. Sometimes you have to attack it. Human things require different approaches. It's not always smart to storm the hill. Confidence can be a powerful weapon against fear. In competition, I never want our opponents to see us hurt, down, or worried. If they see they're getting to us, they'll gain confidence. By showing confidence in crisis, we become stronger. I tell our players, show confidence, hide weakness. And for leaders, whether you completely believe it or not, you must have the expression on your face and the words in your mouth that the team is going to win.
Duncan's message here is clear. Before your team hears a word, they see your posture and they see your body language, your walk, your expression, your energy. Whether you like it or not, it all broadcasts a message. And when pressure's at its highest, that message needs to be one of belief, particularly in the people around you. And that lesson from West Point, that lesson in leadership is learned and it is lived. Every movement, every expression, even clean shoes, it all feeds into what your team feels. Random, but my mom's dad always used to tell me that you have to have clean heels on your shoes. He says no one else is going to notice, but you know that they're there, and that's going to give you confidence. And that stuck with me for a long time. But going back to Coach K, the takeaway I think here, and for me in high performance, those emotions, particularly in kind of chaotic situations, they can be incredibly contagious. So if you're the leader, your body is actually part of your communication toolkit. If you walk like a champion, your team starts to believe that too. So you don't really have a say over how your body language is interpreted, but you have a say over the way that that message is sent out. So I always like to say to athletes and to leaders, leave no doubt. How do you want your athletes and your sort of followers to feel? Set that tone, model that behavior, and they'll come along for the ride.
I just want to pull out that one point. Your body is part of your communication toolkit. I love that. I love that. And it's a perfect lead into this section. And he says, a leader's responsibility to his team is paramount. It overshadows even his own personal feelings at any given time. At the Final Four, I may be worried or upset or concerned that all the media hype is destroying our team unity, but I will not allow myself to show those feelings to the group. I have to be strong enough to say to myself, that's not allowed. That would be violating my commitment to them. I'm not allowed to feel sorry for myself right now. I'm not allowed to be down. I'm not allowed to be angry. I'm not allowed to be weak right now, because I know that these people are dependent on me. I beat back the emotion that I feel. This particular personal determination I have reminds me of my mom, who would never allow my brother or me to know that we were poor when we were growing up. She just wasn't going to let us worry about it. I never knew we were poor. I never even thought about us being poor. We didn't have a car. We didn't own a house. We didn't have money. And if it ever bothered her, she never showed to her kids. And I can't let my players know if I'm troubled about something personally. A leader should strive to do his best 100% of the time. That's why I try to eliminate all obstacles, both personal and mental, that might prevent our team from doing its best. As a result, I'm always asking myself the important question, okay, what does this group need right now? Leadership, like basketball, is a game of adjustments. If a leader is too structured, he'll be unable to adjust quickly, unable to seize the moment with decisiveness and creativity. And basically, I believe a big part of leadership is about winning the moment. Greg, that one question stood out. What does this group need right now? I think we just talked about this.
Yeah, mate, that question, that's the heartbeat of elite leadership. Coach K's point is beautifully human leadership. It's not about ignoring your feelings, it's about managing them, particularly in service of other people. And he's not saying don't feel fear or don't feel doubt. He's saying those feelings don't really get to steer the ship when others are really depending on you. Leadership, it's a game of adjustments. You've got to be structured but not stiff, decisive, not detached. And that one question, what does this group need right now? That keeps you anchored in purpose, not in ego.
So, Greg, we're a little bit into this episode, so let's talk a little bit about basketball, shall we?
Oh, he's a basketball coach. Oh, you think you should have mentioned.
So, in 1991, Duke finally broke through to win its first national championship under Coach K. However, just a year earlier, Duke had been humiliated by UNLV in the 1990 championship game, losing 103-73 in what remains the largest margin of defeat in a title game. I think what they call the Running Rebels, the UNLV team, I believe so. That UNLV squad was a juggernaut loaded with NBA talent, and they were actually riding a 34-0 season and riding a total 45-game win streak and were widely considered unbeatable. So when Duke met them in the Final Four in 1991, it was actually seen as a formality that UNLV were this huge favorite and were expected to cruise to another title. But what happened next became stuff of college basketball legend. Duke, led by Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, and Grant Hill, shocked the world. So this little story that's about to follow is after the Final Four win against UNLV, but before they've played the final. And he says, when the sun finally came up, we showered, shaved, had breakfast, and got on the team bus, headed for the Hoosier Dome for practice. And I did not like what I saw. This has got me going. The first thing I noticed was two of our freshmen were wearing Indiana Jones hats.
Amazing.
I'll read that again. The first thing I noticed was that two of our freshmen were wearing Indiana Jones hats. What's going on? I said to myself. Other members of the team didn't have their warm-up suits zipped up. They looked sloppy. I watched the players strut into the Hoosier Dome. It was cocky, arrogant kind of walk. I studied their body language, their mannerisms, the way they talked to one another, the way they smirked, and I didn't like anything I saw. Nothing. So when we got to the locker room, I asked all the managers, trainers, and doctors to leave. Everyone out except the players and coaches, I said sternly. Then I blistered them. I don't like the way you look. I don't like the way you walk. I don't like the way you talk. I don't like the way you dress. You guys are still living the UNLV game. You should just go back to the hotel and let everyone kiss your ear and pat you on the back. You should just go watch the tape of the UNLV game because there's no way in hell you can beat a great team like Kansas. No way. Only an ordinary team would be satisfied beating UNLV. but an ordinary team won't win tomorrow night because an ordinary team cannot beat a great team. Now get the hell out of here. And I stormed out of the locker room into a side office. 5 minutes later, I came out to see if my tirade had done any good. But nobody was in the locker room. As I walked out into an eerily quiet arena, I saw a sight I will never ever forget. To this day, it gives me chills. All the players had gathered together at centre court. They were standing there, waiting for me. But there was something about the way they were standing. Their faces, the looks in their eyes, the fact they were close together, and they were standing as a team. They were telling me they were ready, and they didn't have to say a damn word. At that moment, I knew we were going to win the national championship. I knew then and there that they had cleansed themselves of the big victory and opened themselves to the opportunity of an even bigger victory. The final score of the Kansas game was 72-65. Duke University won its first national championship.
That's a great story. For a number of reasons, I think the Indiana Jones hat is a particular highlight for me. But if we're going to stick to the whole purpose of this podcast, I suppose, it's a case study in emotional intelligence and leadership timing. Be at your best when your best is needed. He's come in, he's read the energy, saw it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like that hangover from the UNLV win. He sees that subtle arrogance, that sort of mental slip, as it were. And he knew something essential. You can't win a championship if you're still living in your last victory. And that's a mistake that plenty of teams and a lot of businesses as well, they can make that too. They celebrate too long, they get sloppy, they lose the edge that kind of got them to where they needed to be. What's most important here is actually the response. The players didn't argue, they didn't sulk, they gathered together in silence at centre court. And that's not just buy-in, that's that collective belief. That's what elite culture looks like. It's standards, it's honesty, and it's the ability to just snap back into focus when it really does matter the most.
Yeah, it's just really great in situ coaching. And I've used that saying before that focus is the shepherd of the mind. And it's like Coach K shepherding his flock back together and getting them to refocus. He knew exactly what they needed. And I think it's really important to point out to everybody, Coach K started at Duke in 1980, and he won his first national championship in 1991. So it took him 11 years to build that team, to build that culture. Obviously, since then, he's had tremendous success. But, he highlights in the book his first 2 years were losing seasons. It's a reminder that success sometimes takes time. So a little bit of a transition here to Coach K, and he talks about the importance of traditions. And again, Duke was not an historically great program before he arrived. And that history that probably a lot of our listeners have grown up with, it's still relatively recent, from 1991 onwards. And he says, after the last game of the season, win or lose, I will thank our team. I loved coaching you guys, I'll say in the locker room. And then I'll go around to each one of our players individually, shake their hands, give them a hug, and say a heartfelt and sincere thank you. I do that with every team every year. It's a personal tradition. Tradition builds pride, fosters team unity, and reinforces confidence. It lets people know that they are part of something grand. And I find that people generally want to be on a team. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be in a situation where they feel that they are doing something for the greater good. Therefore, if people really are part of something with a lot of tradition, they'll be less likely to be jealous of a teammate or do something detrimental to the organization. For example, I would never do anything to harm West Point. Grant Hill would never do anything to harm Duke. And Greg, I love this phrase they use in the book about traditions, and he talks about binding the past to the present. And he says, there's something about the Yankee pinstripes. There's something about the Marine Corps dress uniform. And there is something about a Duke basketball jersey. When our freshmen put one on for the first time, they know they should be proud of it, but they may not know exactly why. Well, over the next 4 years, we will teach them why. And that's why, even if once in a while the overall design of the uniform changes, like larger shorts or a slight color adjustment, the block letters that spell Duke never change. Never. Putting on a Duke uniform means something in our program. Just seeing it engenders pride. It raises emotions and brings back memories. It binds the past to the present and therefore symbolizes Duke tradition. Cameron Indoor Arena, where we play our home games, does the same. Cameron is not a large 40,000 seat coliseum. Rather, it is a refurbished, unair-conditioned, old-fashioned campus gym with a beautiful interior woodwork and a personality all of its own. Championship banners hang from the rafters along with the retired numbers of a few select players. In 1990, Sports Illustrated ranked Cameron Indoor Stadium as the number 4 active venue for sports in the 20th century, along with places like Wrigley Field and Yankee Stadium. Over the years, there have been suggestions to build a new modern arena, but I politely declined the thought. Even though people are well-intentioned, Cameron is a tradition that can never be rebuilt once it's gone.
Yeah, Duncan, Steve Jobs once said, tradition is culture you can see. And this section is powerful. What I like is that Coach K's reverence for tradition. It's not nostalgic, it's intentional psychology. Tradition in his hands really does become a performance enhancer. It grounds players in meaning, it gives their effort a sense of context. And in high pressure environments, that sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than yourself, that is a massive competitive edge. The Duke jersey, which I didn't really know anything about here, that block letter never changing, that's great. That's symbolic architecture, just like the Marine Corps dress uniform or the Yankee pinstripes. The uniform itself bears a standard, a visual cue that says this means something, act accordingly. And that's what separates programs from dynasties. It's not just talent, it's that shared meaning.
Symbolic architecture. Oh, another great phrase. I think we certainly heard this in episode 4 with Dan Carter when he was talking about the reverence for the All Blacks rugby jersey. And one thing we've learned from all of our performers is that they're constantly seeking ways to learn and get better, even when they've made it to the top. And Coach K is no different. And he says, in 1992, Duke basketball won our second national championship in a row. At age 45, I was still a fairly young coach to have achieved that kind of success. So where was I supposed to go and learn after that? How does a successful leader continue to get better? Well, I was fortunate to have been asked to be the assistant under Chuck Daly for the 1992 Olympic Dream Team. What an honor that was for me. And even after winning the 2 national championships and being at the top of my profession in college, I went into a situation where I was the low man on the totem pole for a couple of months. And over the years, I've turned down several lucrative offers from various NBA teams. The big money has never been a motivating factor for me, but I always wondered how it would be. It was always the challenge that interested me. Working with pros on the dream team, both coaches and players, helped me understand and believe that I could, in fact, be a good coach in the NBA. In essence, I utilized the summer of 1992 to help develop my own confidence, and it made me stronger when I returned to Duke that next fall. I will also ask people for advice on a regular basis. I have several good friends, for example, who are scouts in the pros, so I'll ask them to come in and watch a practice or look at some tapes of me or just sit down and discuss the upcoming season. I try to get their perspective because they're outsiders who don't see our team on a regular day-to-day basis. Continual learning is a key to effective leadership because no one can know everything there is to know. In leadership, things change. Events change, circumstances change, people change. As a matter of fact, leadership is all about change. Leaders take people to places they've never seen before. And Greg, that is where we'll leave it. But as always, success leaves clues. So what are your top 10 life lessons from Leading with Heart by Coach Mike Krzyzewski?
My top 10 leadership lessons from Leading with the Heart by Mike Krzyzewski. Number 1, define success on your own terms. Don't let others dictate what winning looks like. He says, if you're always striving to achieve a success that's defined by someone else, I think you'll always be frustrated. Number 2, build a culture, not just a team. Every season, create a new shared identity and standard. He says, every year, we create a brand new culture for Duke basketball. Number 3, communicate like it's a system. Talking is a skill. Teach it, drill it, and demand it. Coach K says, we not only employ an offensive system and a defensive system, we employ a communication system. Number 4, trust is the bedrock of leadership. Say what you mean and mean it fast. He says, I am the truth. At any time, I can and will tell you where you stand. Number 5, discipline is care in action. Being tough is a form of love. He says, I'm not going to coach them if they're not going to give me their best effort. Number 6, leadership adjusts to the moment. Rigidity kills, awareness leads. He says leadership, like basketball, is a game of adjustments. Number 7, pride is your signature. Everything you do represents you, so do it right. He says everything we do has our own personal signature on it. Number 8, lead with humanity. People follow real leaders, not perfect ones. He says, they're not going to believe you unless they trust you, and they're not going to trust you unless you always tell them the truth. Number 9, practice for pressure. Train in chaos so you're calm in crisis. He says, we perform all kinds of game-like drills over and over again. That is the key to performing well in real life. And finally, number 10, heart is the ultimate multiplier. The right person with heart lifts the entire team. He says, he's the one who makes the formula work, the element that sets off the explosive reaction.
Greg, another fantastic top 10. But as always, we can learn from things to avoid. So, what are your mistakes to avoid from Leading with Heart by Mike Krzyzewski?
My top 10 performance mistakes to avoid from Leading with the Heart by Coach Mike Krzyzewski. Number 1, living in yesterday's win. Avoid letting a big victory dull your edge. He says, you're still living in the UNLV game. Only an ordinary team would be satisfied beating UNLV. Number 2, using too many rules. Avoid creating so many laws that you lose leadership flexibility. He says too many rules get in the way of leadership. They just put you into a box. Number 3, ignoring body language. Avoid letting appearance contradict confidence. He says, I don't like the way you look. I don't like the way you walk. I don't like the way you talk. Talking about his team after the UNLV victory. Number 4, leading with ego instead of awareness. Failing to ask what the team really needs. What does this group need right now, he says. Number 5, mistaking control for preparation. Avoid over-planning without connection. Coach K says, if the students can predict what the teacher's going to do all the time, they stop thinking. Number 6, seeking recognition instead of responsibility. Avoid performing to be seen, not to serve. He says, my job isn't just to win basketball games, it's to lead my team, to take care of my men. Number 7, letting emotions lead. Avoid showing fear or doubt when the team needs strength. Coach K says, I'm not allowed to feel sorry for myself right now. I'm not allowed to be down. Number 8, coaching every team the same way. Avoid treating unique people with a copy-paste approach. Coach K says, every team I've had in my coaching career, I've coached differently. Number 9, forgetting fun is fuel. Avoid draining joy from the journey. He says, that's all we did during that practice, play volleyball. And finally, number 10, thinking leadership ends with success. Avoid believing the job is over once you win. He says, tradition builds pride, fosters team unity, and reinforces culture. Thank you so much for joining myself and Duncan on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider supporting the show by clicking the link in the show notes, or at least share this amazing podcast with people you know. See you next time on Performers.